Everyone, my name is Catia Matos and it's great to be here at the BA Live to present a work from a few years ago, but it's still quite relevant today. I'm going to talk about how we used short-term behavior for protected amphibian in UK to inform the application of road mitigation measures. Pod-breeding amphibians are one of the most effective groups by roads, and roads impact amphibians at the population level by disrupting and fragmenting their habitat, therefore contributing to the disruption of their natural movements during spring and autumn. And this is quite visible when we have one of the highest levels of road mortality during these periods for this group. Pond-breeding amphibians from temperate regions have two main movement cycles in spring and in autumn. One is when they migrate from the summer-winter habitat to the breeding ponds, and the other is dispersal, when they do it from their natal ponds to their other breeding ponds. The first is mainly performed by adults and is referent to inter-population movements, and dispersal is usually performed by juveniles and it can be considered interpopulation. To reverse the negative impact of roads on pond-breeding amphibians, tunnels and fences are implemented worldwide as road mitigation measures. Fences are implemented to guide animals moving towards the tunnels, and tunnels allow animals to cross under the road safely and avoid collision with cars. The main goal of these systems is to revert the effect of habitat fragmentation and promote landscape connectivity. To understand if landscape connectivity is actually dependent on the systems, we need to understand how animals are responding to road mitigation and how road mitigation is actually supporting their movement. The great crested newt is a protected European species that is usually targeted for road mitigation application. This protected species is known to be active around tunnels and fences, and is usually the reason why many of these systems actually exist in UK. Most northern countries are also actually implement systems for the species. There's a huge gap in understanding how the species behave when encountering the system, and if actually the system is supporting equally different movements for other amphibians. Usually, to understand responses, we need large samples of individuals, and radio tracking amphibians can be expensive, and sometimes they don't produce the adequate knowledge. Responses from great crested newt to road mitigation up to this point were quite ambiguous, and quantitative understanding of how many animals are using the system was a big gap. With this, we wanted to focus on three main behavioral patterns, and we really wanted to understand if newts were using the system as part of their home range or just for transit, and if fences were guiding individuals or deflecting movement at random. Also, we wanted to know if individuals were following fences to reach the tunnel, and once reaching the tunnel, would they intentionally cross or enter? All of these parameters are actually considered when implementing measures. However, numbers didn't actually exist to support any of these responses. We tested these hypotheses in a road mitigation system built in 2006 in UK, in Peterborough, in Hampton Nature Reserve, which is a SSSI. This site is home of more than 30,000 newts and is considered one of the largest populations in Europe, with 340 ponds. The mitigation is composed by one ACO, small tunnel in the middle, and two large tunnels connected with a fence on both sides. Here you can see from the aerial image. The system is monitored since 2008 by FrogLife, and in 2014 and 15, we decided to build an experiment to test newts' responses in 2 seasons, autumn for dispersal and spring for adult migration. For each season, we went out to mark newts in the evening and collect information on their movements in the early morning. For marking the newts, we use a fluorescent pigment that can be applied for microhabitat studies for amphibians. It can be applied for different life stages and is safe and less invasive than radio tracking. Newts leave a discrete fluorescent trail that can be observed for several hours or even days, and is actually weather resistant, which allows us to maximize effort with little disturbance. To recapture the newts, to follow the tracks the next morning with the UV light, and we took measures around distance, straightness, path, and individual orientation. This is us in the evening, looking for newts along the fence. Once we find an animal, we would take a quick photo of the belly patterns if they were adults, and then mark the site for capture with the flag and code for all animals. We would gently dip the back legs and tail of the newt in fluorescent powder and release it back to the original position. This operation won't take more than 20 seconds. Here's an example of a newt leaving a fluorescent trail. And this is me in the morning trying to understand where they went in a previous night. During the morning, we will also take, again, other measurements around distance traveled and orientation of trajectory in relation to the mitigation system. Again, for those three hypotheses that I earlier mentioned, we use the distance traveled to understand if newts use the system as part of the home range, and we use the index of straightness and orientation in relation to the system to understand if the movements of newts were random in relation to the road mitigation. We used final position and calculated the effects of season and location to understand if individuals' choices were changed when encountering the tunnel. Now the results, and I will discuss these as we go along. We performed 38 surveys and tracked 387 newts. From the animals that actually moved, we measured distances traveled for 222 in autumn and 48 in spring. In autumn, 60% of the individuals moved more than 10 meters, with the highest percentages actually moving less than 5 meters per night. Low adult recapture in general between seasons and small capture numbers in spring suggest that individuals do not cross the road as part of their annual breeding migrations, and that they actually use the tunnel and fences as part of their normal foraging environment. Although we couldn't actually understand if this was a change part of the mitigation system, we needed to kind of have pre-road movements, behavioral studies during the implementation of road to understand this. Straightness of path along the fences suggested that these barriers actively maintain the newts away from the roads. Effective tunnel crossings by newts may therefore be improved by positioning more tunnels close together. It is suggested a maximum of 30 meters intervals between tunnels, yet our results suggest that such distances are too great for newts, and distances traveled by newts were shorter than inside the tunnels. Newt seems to change their path where the fence angle at the tunnel entrance change and direct them then towards the habitat. A number of individuals actually attempting to cross the tunnels were again very low. The newts found at the tunnel entrance moved away from the tunnel towards the fence and the surrounding environment, with low numbers actually moving towards the tunnel. Microhabitat conditions at the tunnel entrance can impact the way in which amphibians move through this area to get to the tunnel. And amphibian tunnels can suffer as well from significant pollution from the road surface. We know that newts may hesitate to enter tunnels due to the changes in microhabitat and temperature. And also, usually tunnel entrances go through a lot of vegetation removal and maintenance, and this may deter actually animals to use the tunnels. But still, it's unclear whether the newts choose a particular environment in these systems, and they go back to these places and use it as part of their refuge and foraging habits, while moving on land during the night. But once inside the tunnel, newts tend to move in straight paths. Okay, so they actually tend to search for the exit and making a full or partial cross during the night. But again, those numbers are really low. And although distances traveled were shorter in spring, there was even a stronger effective season in the path straightness of newts. And spring migration is typically considered to involve more direct straight line, which was the case of our study. The number of spring days with precipitation also was lower than in autumn, which may actually have influenced part of these movement patterns. The low number of adult newts combined with changes in orientation and small number of recaptures actually makes us think that responses towards the linear infrastructure may have a negative effect on the individuals. Newts have a strong fidelity homing instinct, and this fidelity may extend to terrestrial sites around ponds, causing adults to remain near the pond and not really kind of move away from their breeding ponds during spring. Due to homing ability, adults perform shorter and less random explorative movements when encountering a fence or a tunnel, and this plays an important role in changes in orientation. Although information on how amphibians get used to the system is still lacking, and how they actually use their navigation cues around the system is also lacking. Better understanding of the consequences of these results for metapopulation dynamics will be really important. And although behavioral data collection is time consuming, once compiled can help us understand and be incorporated in individual-based models and help us understand how populations will behave in the long term. This could also provide information on the minimal number of crossings that we need to maintain populations around the systems in the long term, 30, 50 years. Thank you for listening, and thank everyone that helped me during this project. If you are interested in this work and you want to discuss further, please email me. Thank you for listening again. Thank you.
Well, that was a great talk by Katia. So she's here. If you have any question, please let us know. Uh, so the first question, it's already there in the YouTube chat. So what specific responses are Newt showing towards linear infrastructure that might prevent them from reaching the tunnel?
So most animals actually show random paths at the tunnel entrance. So this may deter them to actually find the tunnel in this context. And also the tunnel entrance goes through a lot of maintenance usually, and some of those tunnels may not kind of provide the necessary microhabitat that the newts may rely to actually move in different seasons. So a more random type of behavior would be found at the tunnel entrance.
And I know you mentioned at the very end, but what are the different kind of navigational cues that the newts use to navigate? Do you have like much idea about it?
In this, so usually newts are very dependent on weather conditions, and additionally, they, especially adults, they know exactly where they need to go during those two type of migrations that I meant. The juveniles usually have a more exploratory type of behavior that differently from the adults can make them find the tunnel more easily. But the adults definitely have a more homing type of behavior that usually is associated with foraging behavior around road mitigation measures. So that's why you will find a higher number of adults around the fence, for instance.
So, question asked by David. Do other animals use these tunnels to cross safely, or are they only used by newts? Might predators use the tunnels to hunt the newts?
That's actually a great question. These specific tunnels were implemented for great crested newt, but we know that other animals use them, such as deer. Deer is one of the main species actually using those two big tunnels that we saw in that image. Other We implemented actually a camera trap on one of the tunnels, the small one, and we know that small mammals also use it. But we haven't seen any foxes or other type of predators such as owls, for instance. And we know that, for instance, one of the things that we were actually worried for the study was that maybe predators will spot the fluorescent newts, but fortunately, most of the tracking was done in rainy nights, and apparently that decreases the predation risk.
A question asked by Ellen. Are there already potential solutions for improving tunnel microhabitats for newts?
There's a lot of research to be done on this, on enrichment for tunnels for amphibians in general, actually for different species, because targeting one species is actually not enough. So we know that is a general problem, rural mortality and habitat fragmentation for amphibians, and different species might need different types of microclimates for internals. But the enrichment and maintenance of tunnel microhabitat needs a lot of funding and money and people, and usually the research that is backing up all of this maintenance, unfortunately, it's not being done yet.
Question asked by Abby. Could there be a way to make the tunnel more attractive to the newts, maybe by providing some high quality food resources?
That's actually a good point. The idea of the newt crossing under the tunnel would need to be definitely a natural display of their behavior. Attraction to tunnels has been done, I think, for many mammals and carnivores, where they need to kind of develop that type of habituation to the structure because that structure wasn't there before. But I haven't heard about habituation for amphibians, but I know that it's something that needs to be done.
Since we are running out of the time, one final question by Tang. What is the minimal number of successful crossing identified for effective mitigation? And how was this threshold determined?
Yeah, that's a great question, and it would definitely depend on the system and the population that the system is supporting. We know that for this particular population, we need more models supporting how many newts would need to cross successfully per year, even though with this study is not enough. But by doing studies like this, understanding how many individuals could cross different types of structures could help us develop modules that will allow us to understand how many successful crossings are needed for each type of population. For a big population like this, and only having 20 animals crossing per year, I think that it might be quite negative, but I'm kind of making assumptions here. But yeah, more research is needed.
Thank you again for presenting your research and congratulations on your result. Obviously, we need more conservation strategies for other amphibians and other less studied animals.
Thank you so much.